The Titanic is sinking 58 nautical miles away. What do? Well, if your head are caught, you immediately go and wake up the captain. Now, let's acknowledge this for the act of courage that it was. You see, Harold was the 21-year-old Marconi operator on board a third-class passenger liner called the Carpathia, and they were making their routine trip from New York to what is now Croatia. 21 years old, and he had had this job for 2 months. Just around midnight, he received the final transmission from the Titanic. Come at once, we've struck a berg, all stations distress. And he burst into Arthur Rostron's room and dragged him out of bed. And from that moment, Captain Rostron's crisis response was a masterclass. They were headed to Croatia? Not anymore. He turned that ship right around back through the same ice field that had just sunk an unsinkable ship. He had officers on deck guiding him through the ice, and anyone not on deck was going from door to door, gathering anything that they could, anything that the passengers could spare. They set up a triage center in the mess hall and gathered every warm drink they had. Because Arthur Rostron was determined that there would be survivors that night. And they were. The crew of the Carpathia pulled every single survivor of the Titanic out of the icy North Atlantic that night. Captain Rostron had every scrap of steam redirected to that engine. Lights, heating, none of it mattered. They were headed to the Titanic. When Harold told them they were coming, he said they would be there in 4 hours. They were there in just over 3. Now, what if I told you that there was another ship much closer to the Titanic that night? The Californian was so close that when the distress flares went up, they saw them from the deck of the ship. And yet, by the time they responded between 9 and 10 a.m. the next morning, all they found was wreckage. The Carpathia was already well on its way back to New York with the survivors. You see, Captain Lord was also asleep that night, and he would not be woken up. The story of a crisis response doesn't start with a crisis. It starts with culture. No matter how right you do things, no matter how much you plan, there will always be a moment of crisis. The question is, will someone come and wake you up? Now, I'm sure that if the crew of the Californian had known the scale of that crisis, they would have responded very differently that night. But how can you know? There's no way to know. And it takes courage to act on a hunch. So how do we enable courageous action? Well, it turns out that decades of psychology research have a fairly consistent answer. People take risks when they feel safe, and they feel safe when they feel that the environment is fair. We have large-scale studies that support this, and yet 82% of workers report working in an unfair working environment, according to HR Gartner. And when fairness is missing, people don't necessarily become lazy or disengaged. They go silent. And it turns out that silence sinks ships. So, how do you build a culture that feels safe? People watch the millions of small interactions that you have every day. They watch for punishment. If they make a mistake, is this an opportunity for learning, or is it an opportunity for blame? They look for how recognition works. Is it consistent? And are you acknowledging their time, their expertise, and labor? They look for how information flows. Are expectations communicated clearly, and are they reasonable? Are boundaries consistent? Are questions welcome? They look for how support works. If they ask for help, will they be made to feel small? And they look for opportunities of empowerment. If they take initiative, will they be punished, or are they allowed to act? Research calls this organizational justice and the ability to create a safe work environment relational leadership. But it takes strategy and intention. And yet, how many of us really think about whether our actions are perceived as fair? And in order to hold at a large scale, this has to hold at the individual level. In truth, people experience this as something very simple and very human. If I speak up, how will I be treated, and is it worth the risk? And if the answer is no, they stay silent, because they've decided whether waking you up is worth the risk long before the ship started sinking. Now, it's true that Captain Rostron's incredible crisis response that night saved many lives. But if Harold hadn't gone to wake him up, he never would have had the chance. Later, when Captain Lord and the officers on board the Californian faced a formal inquiry into their lack of response that night, they expressed the deepest regret for their lack of action. But the truth is that they lost that opportunity the moment the decision was made to let Captain Lord sleep. Because you see, it's not about what you'll do in a moment of crisis. That's not the whole story. If you haven't made every moment up to that one count, then sometimes no one will come and wake you up when the Titanic is sinking.